Captain. Big fan of Spider-Man.
Yeah, we'll talk about it later.
We all learn lessons in life. That's unavoidable. But it's the way we learn these lessons that help shape us. Sometimes you have to learn things the hard way by getting grounded for 2 weeks, or by battling a bunch of superpowered villains. You know, the latter is the case for our buddy and pal Steve Rogers, who's learned a lot over his technically 105 years on this planet. He's learned about power, he's learned about trust, he's learned about friendships, he's learned about promises. He's learned about loss, he's learned about redemption. It has all put Captain America on one of the most interesting character arcs in MCU history.
Assemble.
Before he even became Captain America and fought Red Skull, Steve Rogers was learning things the hard way. He was always the moral center of the MCU since his debut in Captain America: The First Avenger. He was just a scrawny young man who was barely strong enough to support his own weight,
He's still skinny.
but wanted to fight in World War II with the Allied forces because it was the right thing to do. Remember when Steve jumped on what he thought was a live grenade to protect the other soldiers around him? Yeah. Steve will never put himself first. He's always prioritized the lives of those around him. His innate goodness allowed him to eventually be seen by the Allies, specifically Dr. Abraham Erskine, as someone who could make a difference in the war if he only had the right body. This eventually led him to being transformed into Captain America by the super soldier serum, impressing his eternal love, Peggy Carter, in the process. Now Steve Rogers was finally able to be the change he wanted to see in the world. But there was one man standing in his way: Red Skull. This was Cap's fight. Steve Rogers never liked bullies, something we saw at the beginning of The First Avenger, when he got beat up outside a movie theater after telling some dude in front of him to shut up. While that was a much smaller bully, in World War II, one of the biggest bullies had to be Red Skull, who was a great choice as Cap's first villain. His goal was to use the Tesseract, which housed the Space Stone, to create Hydra's New World Order. Despite never meeting Cap, Red Skull was well aware of the Star-Spangled Hero because he watched some of Captain America's films he starred in for the USO. As you can see, Cap was somewhat of a movie star back in the day to motivate the troops. In Red Skull, Steve Rogers saw what the super soldier serum could do to the people with evil intentions. Johann Schmidt was obsessed with power and wanted to be the strongest man in the world, so he tested one of Abraham Erskine's early version of the super soldier serum on himself, and, well, it didn't go very well. He became hideously disfigured, earning himself the name Red Skull. Red Skull is literally the evilest version of what Steve Rogers could become. So Cap quickly realized that he had to use his superpowers for good and keep evil men like Johann Schmidt from achieving their world-threatening goals. These lessons would lead to Steve Rogers risking his life for the greater good. While Captain America ultimately won the battle against Johann Schmidt, he was forced to crash land the plane their final battle took place on in the middle of the Arctic, as it was loaded with powerful weapons. Rogers would then spend the next 66 years frozen in ice before eventually being found by S.H.I.E.L.D. Whew, must be chilly being a Capsicle. When Steve Rogers eventually woke up from his nearly 7-decade slumber, naturally he was a little confused. He immediately ran out of the room he was being held up in to check out the outside world, which was unlike anything he'd ever seen at the time. Seriously, I can't imagine being in his shoes. He sure had a lot to catch up on, but he didn't really have the time to learn about 66 years of content because Nick Fury had a job for him.
I had a date.
Loki, the god of mischief, stole the Tesseract, and he wants Cap and another group of superheroes to go fetch it for him. Knowing it was the right thing to do, Captain America obliged, and thus began the plot of the Avengers. It didn't take long for Captain America to get acquainted with Loki, one of the most lovable villains in the MCU. With the power of the Tesseract in his scepter and an entire army of alien Chitauri by his side, Loki was more than ready to conquer humanity, but not if Captain America had anything to say about it. If you think about it, facing Loki right after going to battle with Red Skull must have really felt like deja vu for Cap. Seriously, these guys have a lot of similarities. They were both madmen willing to go to any lengths to fulfill their goal and maybe even their own egotistical needs. In fact, Captain America even acknowledged the similarities between the two villains when he said, "You know, the last time I was in Germany and saw a man standing above everyone else, we ended up disagreeing." Cap has already dealt with a guy like Loki before, so he wasn't backing down one bit. After this exchange, Captain America and Loki wouldn't really face each other again until the God of Mischief was captured by the Avengers. But you can't deny that Steve Rogers learned a lot from Loki. He learned that the world doesn't just need him, they need a group of heroes dedicated to the same cause, keeping the world safe. Even though he was a man at a time, Rogers knew that there were going to be more superpowered madmen he'd have to deal with in the future, and that he wouldn't be fighting them alone. Luckily, once the fight with Loki and the Chitauri was over, the world went back to normal, or at least as normal as it could be after an alien invasion. Steve was finally able to chill out a bit and catch up on a few things. At the beginning of Captain America: The Winter Soldier, we see Steve Rogers working out with Sam Wilson, aka the Falcon. You know, it's the famous "on your left" scene that still cracks me up to this day.
Don't you say on your left. Come on!
Seriously, the dude is a machine. Sam Wilson is in incredible shape, and he can't even compete with the super soldier. On top of that, it even had Cap's famous list of things to catch up on, which included I Love Lucy,
I'll put it on the list.
the moon landing, the Berlin Wall, Steve Jobs, disco, ugh, Thai food, Star Wars, Star Trek, Nirvana, Rocky, and the Trouble Man soundtrack. Fun fact, the list of things to catch up on is different depending on the international release you're watching. But enough of all that, let's get into the Winter Soldier. Bucky Barnes was Steve Rogers' best friend, who was believed to have died after plummeting hundreds of feet from a train, but all of his Hydra experimentations allowed Bucky to survive the fall. Although he did lose his left arm in the process, he continued to get experimented on and brainwashed to the point that he didn't even recognize who he was anymore. Oh, but he did get a nice cybernetic arm for his troubles. Hydra is just so kind, aren't they?
Thank you, Master.
Similar to Cap, he became somewhat of a super soldier himself, known as the Winter Soldier. The Winter Soldier went on to do some pretty horrible things in the next 50 years, eliminating anyone who was a threat to Hydra, such as Howard Stark and his wife Maria. It's something that affected Captain America's relationship with Iron Man later on.
I didn't know it was him. I just did you know.
Anyway, the point is that the Winter Soldier was brainwashed by Hydra, who staged this whole secret undertaking of S.H.I.E.L.D. and ended up attacking Cap. Captain America tried to do everything he can to save his best friend Bucky and ultimately succeeded, even though it wasn't easy. He broke through the decades of brainwashing by Hydra to get his best friend back. He learned from the Winter Soldier to not give up on anyone he loves. Even when Bucky disappeared at the end of Captain America: The Winter Soldier, Cap still didn't give up on him and went with Sam Wilson to hunt him down. But the Winter Soldier wasn't really even the main villain of the film. The real villain was Hydra and their leader Alexander Pierce. Man, was this dude an unlikable character or what? Even though Robert Redford is amazing. Throughout the film, we saw Cap question why S.H.I.E.L.D. were going to such lengths in regards to global security. It just didn't make sense for them to be so controlling, and his suspicions proved correct when he learned about the Hydra takeover and what the true purpose of those Project Insight helicarriers were. These helicarriers were going to roam the planet and take out anyone they deemed a threat. Steve quickly learned that he couldn't put trust in governments and big organizations. He would strive for freedom moving forward, not mind control or any ridiculous measure to make people do your bidding for you. He will trust in his people and help redeem those who deserve it. The next villain Captain America would face is Ultron.
Captain America, God's righteous man.
And that is one robot with a whole lot of daddy issues. One thing I've noticed in the MCU is that as awesome as Tony Stark was, he was often his own worst enemy. Case in point, Ultron. The psychotic robot was his creation, and it nearly wiped out the entire planet. Ultron was created using the decrypted code from the Mind Stone within Loki's scepter, and was retooled by Tony Stark with the help of Bruce Banner.
I want to help you put Jarvis in this thing.
The AI was designed to protect the Earth from intergalactic threats after the events of the first Avengers movie, but it soon deemed humanity as the world's biggest threat and planned to wipe them all out. Although Age of Ultron wasn't the best MCU movie, it still showed us how big of a threat Ultron was. With the help of Wanda Maximoff, aka Scarlet Witch, and her brother Pietro, aka Quicksilver, this android planned to pick up the entire country of Sokovia and slam it into the Earth like a huge meteorite to create an extinction-level event. This would wipe out all organic life so he could replace people with machines like himself. Yeah, it wouldn't be a fun time if this had happened, that's for sure. Captain America battled Ultron in South Korea and even faced a legion of Ultrons alongside the Avengers in Sokovia. But if I'm being honest, Steve Rogers didn't learn all that much from Ultron. The robot focused much of his hatred towards its father, Tony Stark.
Do I look like Iron Man? Stark is
That being said, the fight against Ultron definitely strengthened Cap's abilities as the leader of the Avengers. He didn't bat an eye sharing his opinion with Tony Stark at Clint Barton's family farm. This disagreement was foreshadowing what was to come and showed us that Cap learned being a leader ain't easy. You can't always please everyone. I believe Steve learned a lot from the vision Wanda Maximoff showed him. As you already know, Wanda and Pietro were working with Ultron at first, before they betrayed him to join the good guys. Before their change of heart though, Wanda used her powers to get into each of the Avengers' heads.
It's time for some mind games.
And make them face their biggest fears. Each Avenger had a different vision, but for Steve Rogers, he was brought back to World War II, where he promised to dance with Peggy Carter. Of course, he was never able to deliver on his promise, which really upset him. It showed us that Steve Rogers had definitely not forgotten about Peggy and is thinking of what could have been. His secret desires finally came to light, and he knew he had to fulfill them in some way. Cap learned not to give up on what you want and to always fulfill your promises. Captain America Civil War is a top 3 MCU movie in my mind. It has literally everything you need in a superhero movie. We got to see our favorites go up against each other, as it was Team Captain America versus Team Iron Man. We also got to see Captain America fight multiple villains, starting with Brock Rumlow, aka Crossbones. Crossbones was a Hydra infiltrator who was posing as a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent. We saw him tracking down Captain America in the Winter Soldier before Sam Wilson took him out of commission for a bit. When he returned, he had one goal in mind: take out Captain America. He almost succeeded in doing so in Lagos if it wasn't for the Scarlet Witch. Crossbones taunted Cap about Bucky before he got blown up, which really got on Steve's nerves. He won't stand by while anyone talks about his bestie like that, no. But the main villain of Civil War was, of course, none other than Helmut Zemo, a former colonel of the Sokovian Armed Forces and a commander of EKO Scorpion. After what happened in his homeland in Age of Ultron, Zemo came up with an elaborate plot and enacted his revenge by destroying the Avengers from within. Steve Rogers didn't confront Zemo often in the film, but he learned about the villain's intent to see an empire fall. He decided to frame Captain America's best friend Bucky for assassinating the King of Wakanda. Cap was sick of everyone throwing his bestie's name around because he knew it may reveal Bucky's biggest secret. Captain America's true opposition in Civil War was Iron Man. Sure, it was Zemo who put them all at odds in the first place, but the two leaders butted heads very often as a result. At the Hydra Siberian facility, Zemo revealed to Stark that the Winter Soldier was responsible for taking down his parents, something Steve Rogers already knew, but didn't reveal so he could protect his best friend. This decision to not tell Tony Stark the truth about his parents caused a 2-year-long rift in the Avengers. Captain America quickly learned that he wasn't perfect by any means and admits that he messed up. He tried to please everyone and as a result, pleased no one.
He's my friend. So was I.
In his conflict with Tony, Steve learned that, even if it hurts, you have to tell the truth, because it'll come out sooner or later. Even though he was now a fugitive after refusing to sign the Sokovia Accords, Steve still apologized to Tony and promised he would be there for him if Iron Man called. Last but not least, we'll obviously have to talk about Thanos, the Mad Titan.
Tell me his name again.
Who? Oh, you know who.
Thanos. He's a plague, Tony. He invades planets, he takes what he wants.
This is the battle where Captain America learned some of his biggest lessons about loss, redemption, and fulfilling promises. Thanos was undoubtedly the toughest opponent the Avengers had ever faced. Here's a guy who stopped at absolutely nothing to get what he wanted, and what he wanted was power. Power over everything. Thanos' quest to collect all 6 Infinity Stones eventually led him to the Avengers, where Cap learned to deal with loss. In the epic Battle of Wakanda, which was the Avengers' last stand against Thanos, they ended up defeating the Black Order, who are essentially Thanos' henchmen, but were unable to defeat the Mad Titan himself.
All that for a drop of blood.
Despite Wanda Maximoff's best efforts, she had no choice but to let Thanos rip the Mind Stone straight out of her lover Vision's forehead and use it to complete his Infinity Gauntlet. With a quick snap of those Thanos fingers, half of all life in the universe turned to dust at the end of Infinity War. It was the first time Captain America actually lost a fight, and now he had to deal with loss. The next 5 years were very tough for the Avengers, especially Captain America. He lost both his best friends in Bucky Barnes and Sam Wilson, with seemingly no way to get them back. Steve could have wallowed in his misery, but instead counseled people who were also dealing with loss, because that's just the kind of guy Steve is. The living Avengers continued to keep the world safe, but things just weren't the same. If not for our Rat accidentally stepping on a button and sending Scott Lang, aka Ant-Man, out of the quantum realm, who knows what would have happened in Endgame. We thank you, Rat, the true hero. When the Avengers eventually found Thanos at his hideout, the Garden, the Mad Titan had already destroyed the Infinity Stones, so they couldn't bring everyone back that easily. Once again, Steve and the Avengers lost, but thankfully, it wasn't permanent. Once everyone came up with the time heist, Cap was all in. He was fully invested in getting the job done until a side trip to Camp Lehigh in 1970 brought back a bunch of memories. It was the place Steve Rogers learned to become a soldier, which made him think of Peggy Carter. Captain America learned he was worthy of Mjolnir.
I knew it.
And led the all-out assault to defeat Thanos. He mourned Tony Stark's death after they saved the world and decided to finally fulfill the promise he made to Peggy. He goes back in time to give Peggy the dance he promised her and live the happy life he always wanted before coming back to the main timeline as an old man and passing on the mantle of Captain America to Sam Wilson. Cap learned that you could do anything if you put your mind to it. I'm not crying, you're crying. Wow, Steve learned a whole bunch of things from villains, and you know what? Maybe we could all learn a thing or two from Captain America. Like that list he had in The Winter Soldier. Yeah, it's important to make sure you know all of that at least, especially the Thai food part. It is really delicious.